Hi, everyone. See, lots of folks are jumping on, and we will begin just a little after 1 so we can make sure everybody gets their computer and their audio all set up. And in the meantime, we have Ray, who is going to play some music for us while we wait.
Thanks, Carrie. Welcome, everybody. I'll just play some guitar as people are getting settled in.
Thanks, Ray.
You're welcome.
All right. So let's see if I can get myself situated here. It's with slides and pictures and trying to get this all down, right? Okay. There we go.
All right, we see that there's more folks logging into this webinar, and I see the number rising as we speak, and so maybe we'll wait another minute or so to make sure folks get on, or a few seconds anyway.
Sounds good.
We are 1:02 now, and
Okay.
we're going to start the
Great.
family
Thanks,
support
Letty.
documentation webinar. Okay, and I hope most of our direct staff is joining us today because it mostly applies for those that are constantly documenting in your system. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today in our ECAP Family Support Documentation webinar. Before we start, we want to share some information that makes this webinar a positive experience for us, for everyone here around. And at this time, please make sure you are muted and help ensure everyone is able to hear the content. Also, please use the question box if you have any questions. Unmute yourself if you have a comment that you would like to make as appropriate. We will continue to post PDFs on information to share in Basecamp. If you're not registered in Basecamp, send me an email and we gladly register there. Those who want more information about it, we do usually share that in, like I said, in Basecamp. The facilitator will send you an email if you want more requests about this documentation webinar that we have. And can I move on to the next slide, Carrie?
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing about GoToWebinar because a couple of people have said that they can't hear. So you have a gray box that has like your camera, your mic. So sometimes you have to make sure that you're using the right set of headphones, right? Like, is it from your computer? Is it come from your laptop? Or you also have the option to call in on your phone. So it depends on what audio you're using. So you might have to play around with that button so that it gets connected to the right audio.
Can you guys hear me though?
Yes, we could hear you, but
okay.
some folks were having a hard time getting their audio figured out.
But the best is yet to come. And this is the presentation, and we usually do this in every webinar, so you have time to set up your audio. And I'm going to move on to the TCYF ECAP equity statement that we believe strongly. So TCYF ECAP commits to dismantling racism and building an equitable state-founded preschool system in Washington, increasing our understanding of and capacity to address the deep-rooted impacts of bias and racism at every level is the highest priority of our team. We embrace equity as a foundation of any driving force behind our work by listening to and learning from families, contractors, staff, and communities. Driven by this commitment, we develop and revise systems, policies, and practices with the goal of eliminating disparities and transforming lives. Can I move on to the next one, Karen? There. And with that, my name is Leticia Cárdenas. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I want to acknowledge and honor the land that I am on is Yakama Nation. I have done some research and talked to some friends and how is this land recognized, and it's because of the Tapanish area and Wapato area. There's the Columbia River that has a spoon, and that's the fish. They were known by being really good at fishing. So there's an area where it goes really narrow and it goes big. So they be the best fishing at that area, and they're recognized by that. Also by the timberlands and lots of wood around them. So I'm gonna pass it on to Carrie, and she's gonna introduce herself and talk about the next slide.
Hi there, Carrie Beamer. I'm on the ECAP team as an innovation and capacity specialist. I use she, her pronouns, and I am coming to you today from my home in North Bend, which is the ancestral land of the Snoqualmie tribe, who have resided here in the Snoqualmie Valley since time immemorial. So I'll let Ray, you introduce yourself too.
Thanks, Carrie, and thanks, Letty. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our webinar this afternoon. My name is Ray Soriano. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm coming from the traditional lands of the Tulalip, Snohomish, Stillaguamish, and Sauk-Suiattle people in Everett, Washington. And just glad that you are joining us today. And just want to make a comment. There's still a couple of you who are commenting in the question box that either your audio isn't working or that it's a little bit mumbled. As we move on and as you adjust, as Carrie mentioned earlier, maybe we can say that again, but on the right side of your screen, or when you see the when the dash sort of your dashboard up there, you should be able to adjust and make sure that you're on the correct audio. There is a comment that maybe it might be the microphone that Letty that you're using. So we just want to make sure that everybody hears as much as possible, of course. And yeah, there's others who are commenting too that they are not able to hear right now, and others that say that they can. Carrie, you want to walk through one more time just how people can adjust on GoToWebinar?
I think the thing to do for if folks, and maybe somebody can write this in the question box, Ray or Letty, is just say it's the easiest just to get on your phone. There's a phone number you can dial into. It asks for an access code, and that's really the best way to solve any sound problems. So I'm going to move us on because we have a lot to say today, but before I do, I want to just acknowledge that on the ECAP team, we share our pronouns. We believe sharing our pronouns is important as sharing our names, and that I have friends and colleagues who have asked me to use correct pronouns for them, so we do. And we encourage all of you to do that as well. All right, so I want to practice a little and make sure everybody has the ability to type some answers into the question box, and that you found it. We are in a webinar situation, so this is kind of difficult. We have so many people. There's 230 people on this webinar today, and there's 3 of us. And we want to make this as interactive as we possibly can, being a webinar and being a place that hopefully you can ask questions, get some clarification. So we just want to practice writing in the question box. And I'm going to ask you a series of things and just put in your preference in the chat box, and hopefully we'll see this cascading falling of responses. And yes, the question is, are you winter or are you a summer? And if you're from this state, you know that that is Campbell's at Lake Chelan, and the winter is Hurricane Ridge. So are you summer or winter? Oh, I love it. I see all these comments pouring in.
I also see, I love every season. And somebody says, winter baby over here.
Awesome. All right, well, I'm going to do a couple more. Cake or pie? Are you cake or pie? What's your preference? I love that some people are like, yes, all, both.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay, last one. Dog or a cat?
I want to participate and I can't hold myself, so I'm like answering over here in the back.
Yeah, I love it. All right, well, it seems like we have successfully figured out how to.
I'm going to type in the box just another note about how to change over to phone audio for the couple of folks who are still trying to get on. So go ahead, Carrie.
Okay, great. Great. Oh, Ray, will you mute yourself? I think it's. There we go. Perfect. All right, so hopefully today we would like to get to a place where we're having some conversations about family support notes. It's a way to really tell the story of all the work that you have been doing with families. And we want to talk about how you can demonstrate how your family supports notes, indicate family progress, and then just again reinforce that it's important to have timely, concise notes that are written in ELMS. Family support notes provide sort of this fact-based description of a family's experience in ECAP. And family support notes can also let your supervisor know what progress is being made with your families. And we just think that it's really important to have accurate, succinct, timely family support notes in ELMS. It's also a compliance for monitoring. If you've been monitored by the CQI team, family support notes is something that we always look for. And when they're really robust in the ELMS, there's no need to do a lot of fact checking on when it's a monitoring visit because it's already sort of been taken care of. So that's sort of our objectives we hope to cover today. I think it's very important for us to set the tone right away about what this training is not today. So what we are not talking about is there is not any new compliance around documentation. This is not about any new monitoring expectations. There's nothing new that's been built into ELMS that didn't exist before today. And this is really not about, oh, you're doing documentation wrong, so this is the right way to do it. And it's not today, we're not really going to dive into that family relationship or establishing that relationship that can sometimes help gather information. This is really strictly about what's going into ELMS. That's really about what it is. It's to give you a little more information about how you all can use your documentation more effectively, and also how, I'm going to go to my next slide. So I think what's the most asked question I ever got when I was a CQI specialist is, what's enough documentation in ELMS and what's too much? And what does documentation really mean? And I feel like we sort of have some extremes on both ends of the side. We have some folks that there may not be anything written in the family support section to very little. That's something that says, I met with mom today. That's all. And then I have the other end of the spectrum where there is pretty specific sensitive material and detail in note sections that it doesn't really need to be there. It can be way more condensed and way more abbreviated. And so what we're trying to do with you all is create something that's more in the middle. What's moving from these extremes to more in the middle. And one way I think we're going to get there is to talk about what exactly are the requirements. Like what does the performance standards say about documentation? So there's actually 3 that have to do with family support. Really only 2 of them have to do with what needs to be documented into ELMS. And so I am just going to walk us through what those standards are. So FEP 5 is about the family support visit content. And it says that staff you must be documenting in ELMS the date, the location, the topics, and the summary of discussion for each family support visit. And, you know, if you go into that family support section in ELMS, it actually walks you through it. It says, what date did you meet? Where was the location? I'm not sure it says topics in there. Somebody can fact check me on that. But then it'll say summary of discussion. And I think that when we get to that summary of discussion is the part that people are sometimes putting too much in, and sometimes it's not enough. Also in ELMS, the standard says follow-up plans. How are you following up? What's happening that you're going to circle back with that family in 4 weeks and see if that resource was enough for them, right? That there's follow-ups, and follow-ups happen as the family need outside of those formal visits, right? That you're putting those contacts that you're having with families in that note section outside of just those 3 or 4 if you're a year-round program, sort of the 30-minute formal visits. If you are doing any joint home visiting with, say, a Head Start program or another home visiting program, we would like that documented in ELMS. And then, of course, the latest addition to this rendering of the standards included mobility mentoring. So you have the pre-assessment, the goals, and the mid-year check-in, which is today, March 31st. So hopefully everybody's got their mid-year goal check-ins done. And then the post-assessment when families are leaving. And then I think it's really important to also talk about how performance standards are the minimum. This is the minimum requirement to meet your contract. And I know many contractors have their own documentation plans. They have their ways of doing things that exceed what we are doing or what the standards say. And you really have to fall back to what your contractor is requiring for documentation. There are some of you out there that may have an exception that you're using some other system and an exception has been granted to you, so you're not following this. That happens at times. So I just want to be mindful that I get it, and I know that not everybody is doing what FEP 5 says. So the other piece about documentation in the standards is about resource and referral. And ELMS kind of walks you through that again. You can kind of go in and it'll say, what did you do? There's check boxes. It'll say, yeah, I gave out resources and referrals. several times during the year. If you come to any of our family support check-ins, we've talked about a bulk update. You can now bulk update resources that were given to families. So if you have a single resource that you want all of your families to know about, you can document that in ELMS through a bulk update. I hope you all have knew that. It was new this fall, but hopefully the word got out there that that's an option now for documentation. And then really just again, what is that follow-up that you're doing around resources? Did it meet the needs? Did it not work? Hopefully to see sort of a closing of the loop around resources or referrals that you gave for a family. And then lastly, in the standards, there is some reference to keeping family records that you're keeping them for the current year. And then that's really it when it comes to what the performance standards say about documenting in ELMS. And again, I think where we're sort of ambivalent about is what does that summary of discussion supposed to contain? And with just running through those standards, I'm going to pause and I'm going to ask Letty and Ray if there's been any questions in the question box.
Yeah, there are a couple, Carrie, and there are some comments as well as questions, including that there are check boxes for the topics. One question that came up is, why doesn't ELMS allow you to enter that you gave a family a referral without putting in a formal family visit?
Did I mention that you may stump us in this webinar and we might not know the answer to this question, and that we are going to include a frequently asked question document that comes off of this particular webinar? Because I am not a super user. I'm not in ELMS every single day. I'm not entering data there. So sometimes when it gets to be very specific that way, I'm not really sure why that is, but I will definitely circle around and ask the data team that.
And we are saving all of the questions from this question box as well, so we can make sure we give you a thorough answer. There also might be a comment underneath that one. Somebody else commented that might pertain to that. And so there's a comment that topics are the boxes you can check, example, kindergarten readiness, goal planning, etc. So thanks for that comment.
Yeah.
And then another comment, unless it's official, like a 30-minute visit, you can only record date and summary of discussion. The check boxes for locations and topics is only for official visits at this point.
Okay.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Recognizing that there's a lot of wisdom in this space right now with the 250 or so of you here. So thank you for sharing what you also know. Okay. And there was a question to see whether we can demonstrate the bulk update option, whether that can be a demonstration.
I can't do it right now on this webinar being recorded, but I promise the next family support check-in that we do, which is, I'm looking at Letty and Ray saying it's the third Thursday of the month, and the next one will be
on April 15th. We'll make sure to show and demonstrate how to use the bulk update again for folks, okay?
Yep.
Because also there's a lot of great comments just that folks love the bulk update. So we'll make sure that we do that. Thanks, Carrie. Yeah. There's another question in here. Can you bulk update and specify that it was a resource? I can only select resource when I say it's a 30-minute meeting.
Yeah, it's sounding like that might be an issue in Elms that we can help address. That resources don't necessarily always happen at a formal visit, right? That could be done just talking to mom in the parking lot as she's picking up kids from preschool. Resources can be shared out at any time, especially when you're providing individualized services, right? So we'll take that information back to the data team and see what we can do about that.
Yeah, these are great questions. I'll go ahead and share some of the other ones. Does that work for folks here? If you document a referral, you have to check off the 30 minutes to check off the referral? Mm-hmm. Is a question.
It sounds, so you all who have been doing this much longer than I have in Elms can hop in here, but it's sounding to me like Elms is making you have a formal visit before you can sort of calculate what your resources and your referrals were. And maybe that's something we need to make a little more user-friendly so that resources and referrals can be shared at any time during the year. It doesn't have to wait until that formal visit. So we might look at fixing that. Oh, I'd love to hear your voice, Ray, but you were muted.
I'm sorry, I'm moving my mouth, but I had my mute button on. Sorry. Yeah, so there's several other questions here, Carrie and Letty. We'll go ahead and get into these too. Should there be mention of mobility mentoring in the home visit summary, or is having the assessments done cover that performance standard?
Yeah, no, just having the assessment will cover the standard. I think what's a mystery at times is when a family opts out and then there's no notes around it, right? Like there's no assessment, there's nothing done, and there's no notes. So you don't have to put a note in there around the completion of the assessment, but it would be very helpful if the family opts out that you are sort of tracking or saying something to the effect that family opted out. We'll continue to check in with families to see if any needs arise or something, putting something in there to sort of explain the opting out. Because I know you all are doing work with families who opt out. That work is still continuing, that you're still giving them resources, that for wherever they were in their space, they just didn't really feel like they wanted to do that goal setting piece. That's fine. We have opt out. You just need to sort of make sure you're documenting that in the notes. And right. Should I go on to the next one?
You can. There are actually lots of questions in here, Carrie, so I'm not sure how you want to do that.
So let's just keep going because we do have some content that we want to get to. And again, we sort of knew that there would be way more questions than we had time or capacity to answer. So we promised to keep a log of all of it. And when I'm done talking, because I'm not looking at the question box, it's too hard to talk. But when I go to Letty and Ray, I'll kind of peruse through some of the questions and see if I can't find like the clumping or clusters of things that are kind of in common with each other. Okay, so this next slide is really about giving some advice around what's the best practice for notes section, right? So we already kind of talked about the performance standards and what would be the minimum requirement. But in those performance standards, the intent of that section is sort of these three things: that there's a summary of what happened, that there's a little context around what was the interaction, and then there's some follow-up planned. So when I talk about summary, in the standards, it uses the word summary of discussion. And again, like I said, sometimes that looks like a 3-word sentence, and sometimes that looks like very sensitive information being shared. That's too much, right? And when we think about summary, what we're thinking of is writing a summary. It doesn't really involve critiquing or analyzing anything. You're just simply providing clear, objective, accurate some of the most important information, right? Does not have to be long. It can be brief. It doesn't have to use identifying information. It can say, met with mom at their home today. We discussed their goal setting. Mom indicated a barrier to reaching her goal this month. Resources were given. Plan to follow up in 2 weeks. That could be the summary, right? That actually included your follow-up. And when we say context, we're just really talking about what are those circumstances for you all to get together. What was the event? Was it a home visit? What is it? Goal planning? What was happening? What was the cause for sort of that meeting? And again, the follow-up is really important to close that loop up. Like, what's your plan? How are you following up? Did you agree that you'll come together again in 8 weeks? Sort of, you know, using that. There's actually that follow-up box in Elm, and I'm not going to be like such a stickler that's like follow-ups should be put in the follow-up box. You can write it into the summary. It's okay. It's just having that is important, so that we can see that loop is being closed, right? So, having said that, one of the things that we know is that bias is real, and it can ink itself into our documentation. And so Ray's just going to talk to us a little bit about bias and documentation.
Yeah, thanks, Carrie. Most of us, if not all of us, have heard and are familiar with the term bias. I mean, we all have bias when it comes to observing people, working with people, our relationships with others. It's natural for us to have bias as human beings. However, that bias can also lead to us expressing some of our own feelings and our opinions, our own judgment in documentation when we put that into ELMS. And Letty and Carrie and I, we took a look at a whole lot of examples in ELMS as we were preparing for this webinar. And what we saw is, for the most part, there isn't a whole lot of bias that seems to play out, but it still is popping up here and there. And that might be due to a number of things, including that many of you are super busy and you're trying to complete the documentation as quick as you can, and some of those sort of biases will show through in your documentation. In other words, interpretations and things like that. And it's really important that when we work with people, of course, we interpret things all of the time. In other words, we add our own feelings, and we think about how the families that we're working with might be feeling about a situation. We just need to be careful that that doesn't go into the documentation. And so, as you see on this slide, as was said earlier, we want to be sure that documentation is factual and that's objective. And in a couple of slides from now, Letty will talk about objective versus subjective a little bit. And as Carrie was mentioning, it really should summarize when you have that summary, especially. Summarize people's actions, what they said and what they reported, what they expressed. And that could be that you say, actually, in the notes, mom or dad said this or reported this versus mom or dad is feeling sad. So to be able to report or say or write that the parent or caregiver that you are interacting with said or reported something to you, that would be more factual than for you to say they're really stressed out about something, or that might be more of your interpretation of the situation that they're in, if that makes sense, okay? And a couple other notes here for documentation, making sure that it does not show your judgment about how people are feeling, about what their intentions or motivations might be. And even though, as Carrie mentioned, a summary can be nice and general, it shouldn't also be so vague that people reading it would interpret it in a number of different ways. And also just be careful not to express your own opinion or interpretation about people or the situation. One of the things I just saw in the question box, hopefully too, you're all viewing the question box yourselves, because, oops, that is my phone. I'll hang that up. Sorry. That's my son trying to call me. Is a comment by Unity. I coach to family service staff to, quote, tell the story objectively and succinctly. So that's another good way to put it. Thank you for that, Unity. And so, yeah, just be conscious about your own bias and how you might be interpreting what's going on when you are interacting with and when you are documenting about those interactions with families. We'll go on to the next slide.
All right, let me get to our next slide.
Meanwhile, everyone get some chocolate because we are hitting the 2 o'clock and you need to wake up because this is the training. So what's the primary goal of documentation? By documenting your process, you ensure efficiency, consistency, I can say that word, and peace of mind for anyone involved. This kind of standardization between processes ensures everyone in your organization is working towards the same goal, the same outcome. So can I go to the next one too? And let me just talk to you about this one. What is the difference between subjective and objective documentation? Subjective information or writing is based on personal opinions, interpretations, points of view, emotions, and judgment. That means how we feel, they feel. Objective, it's information or analysis. It's facts based on measurable and observable that they told you to. Next, Ray is going to talk to us about some examples that we got from ELMS. We read a lot of samples and we tried to show you as much as possible. Can I go to the next slide, Carrie? There you go. And I think this one, Ray is talking about trying to show you some biases if possible here. And this is information that's confidential.
Yeah, thank you, Letty. Thank you, Letty. I want to go and I am seeing a question in the question box that just was pertaining to bias and feelings. And it's a good question. It says, so it says to put what they expressed about their feelings. How do we do that if we can't put how they're feeling? And what I meant to say about not putting feelings is not putting your own feelings in there. So if a parent or a caregiver is telling you or is expressing that they're feeling something, then for sure you can put that in there, right? You can say parent reported that they're feeling really stressed out, or that they're really excited, or whatever it might be. And what I meant by it with the bias is if the parent just comes in and they look like they're stressed, but you're feeling like they're stressed, and so you write that the parent is stressed, but they haven't really expressed that. So that's the difference. I hope that makes sense. But certainly you can talk about in your documentation what the parent is expressing or telling you about how they're feeling. I think that works in there. But as long as you write it in there as such. And so we'll walk through a couple of these so you can we can be thinking a little bit here about these examples. And these are some examples that we changed it up just a little, but for the most part, these are some things that we did see in ELMS. And again, there isn't, we're not here to say right or wrong. It's just sort of how do we shift towards the things that we've already been talking about today a little more. So take a look at this slide. Mom is doing well and will get her GED soon. The kids are doing awesome in school. Parent stress is still challenging. We talked about ways to look at stress and how to prioritize everything. Parent is planning to sign up for rent assistance. So based on what you see here, and again, we're not able to go into small breakout rooms and things like that, but we'd love to see in the question box some of your thoughts. If you were to change this in any way, how might you write this to be more objective and factual? Any thoughts out there? You can go ahead and type that into the question box. I'm seeing a couple of things come through in the question box, like typing out as parent reports ... Yeah, that's a great idea there. Specify if the parent said they are stressed. If not, that should be removed. That's a comment there. And I'm seeing lots of comments. So we'll make sure to hit just a few of these. And again, if you are able to look yourselves as participants at the question box, you can see some of the comments there too. It's a good question. Does the mom say she is doing well? So again, that's another area that you can say, mom said or mom reports she's doing well. Because mom might be reporting that, yeah, I am working on my my goal and I got the kids to school today. And that might be your interpretation that mom is doing well, right? And so those are some of those details there. Parent stated that, she shared, etc. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, per the parent. So yeah, there's some great ways that you're looking at this particular example. We'll go on to the next one. We'll do a couple of these and make sure that we still have time to get to some questions. So next slide. And there is a couple comments that says you're unable to see the questions in the question box. Over in your the toolbar, if you will, or the which you can move around that the choices of sharing and webcam and audio, you should have a question box there. And if you hit the little square that has an arrow pointing out to the upper left, and that should open up your question box. So hopefully that will help for those who want to take a look at the question box. Here's another example. Met with Victor today. He said he was laid off and cannot meet his current goal. Stated he needs certain classes to find a better paying job, but is anxious about going back to school. He shouldn't be anxious since his English is strong and he is motivated. He is feeling frustrated. Discussed updating his resume. His resume is not a very good one and needs to be improved. So again, any thoughts you have if you want to put in the question box. Yeah, there's comments here that there seems to be some personal judgment. You shouldn't be anxious, things like that. Don't state your opinions. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and the comment resume is not very good. And it may be that if this was your note, and maybe that you spoke with this caregiver or parent, Victor, and Victor said, yeah, I don't have a really good resume. There may be a different way to express that than to just say that the resume is not a very good one. And maybe that doesn't even need to be said here. So, great, good comments too. And we'll move on to the next slide. And here's another one. A little bit longer. Phone call to parent to check in. Parent shared that they have been staying home and are doing fine, and she only goes out to the store occasionally. We talked about how she's doing some activities with Ready Rosie, and child has been working on numbers. Parents shared they like the math activities on Ready Rosie. We went over the post-assessment, and parents shared they have no recent changes. Parent is still working on their goal to prepare to attend college. Parent asked about special education for Rena, and I explained that the specialist James will call her for that. I provided free Wi-Fi resources. Parent will keep using Ready Rosie and will contact me if she needs anything. What are your thoughts about that one? Yeah, one comment that's a lot of info. It doesn't necessarily need to know every single step. You know, that's one of those that, as you summarize it, you know, you can play with that. But yeah, this could be something that could be made more more concise and shorter. A couple others that say overall it seems okay, maybe more concise. Yeah. Also, it said use child's name. So that's something we're going to talk in a minute here too about confidentiality. And you know, if you want to be the most sort of general with your notes, you can write child rather than the child's name. So that's a good point too. All right. Thank you. Thanks for the comments too, and thinking through these. So we'll go on to the next slide. And as I was talking about, this is a question that came up even before we as we were planning this webinar. Just how much sort of private information, how much information that we might consider sensitive information should go into a note. And you know, you can take a look at this slide here too. Again, documentation should be as factual as possible and doesn't need to include specific sensitive information. Some examples of what might be sensitive information could include like specific illnesses, mental health challenges, drug or alcohol abuse, child abuse or CPS involvement, criminal behavior or court processes, and domestic violence. So those are some of the things that sometimes we've seen in the notes. And there are certain ways that you can you know, enter those notes and document what was going on without being too specific about those special conditions that are happening for the family. Immigration status is another one. Thank you for that note up here. And the third bullet point, use words that show or describe that an issue was discussed, but in a more general way. Here's an example there on the slide. Dad reported he's continuing to receive treatment for health issues, or talked about wellness resources and provided contact information for a wellness support professional. So these are the kinds of things that, you know, you have to be thinking about how to word these notes that you're putting in. And also, you know, if you find that depending on what your program and you know, your leadership in your program, there might be a need for you to know a little bit more information in these. We're just telling you really what the minimal is here. And, you know, we can't be speaking to what your particular program might want, so that those who are in your program who read these can kind of hear the story and get and see what the storyline is on it. So that's up to you to do that. But we're really cautioning here just to be as confidential and private as possible. Okay. And we do see a lot of questions in the box, so we'll get to as many as we can when we're done going through these slides. Thanks, everybody. We'll go on to the next slide for Letty.
Yes, right. Can you mute yourself? Thank you. Okay, so this is an ELMS example, and let's talk about this one. Keeping documentation confidential is within high importance in ELMS. This is an ELMS example. I think this one is the one that has less words and less of, I found a lot of information talking about domestic violence and even little details of how was the parent suffering through this, and was the child present, little details that is too much for to have this information in ELMS. Again, this refers back to what this is not the training about. It goes back to your contractor. It is important to document this confidential, but your contractor might have a secure way to document it. In a yellow envelope behind the file. You will find the ways to keep it highly confidential, not in ELMS. In ELMS, let's try to see if we can make this one. It talks about depression and anxiety for the parent. It says file visit with the parent. Family doing okay, but mom is dealing with deep depression and anxiety. The stress of COVID-19 is too much for her, and she needs a break. Still learning how to use the kids' online school stuff. Their goal is daily routines, getting tech support, and financial well-being. Husband is working, mom stays at home, working on social interactions between siblings. Will provide resources of depression and anxiety to mom today. So this is an example of the least I could see. And depression, anxiety, stress, what do you guys think about how can we state that in another word that we don't know that mom is feeling deep depression and anxiety? Is there any examples that you can put there, or I don't know, how you write this more confidential? Maybe the first sentence can be covered by mom stated the word that she said, that she feels overwhelmed. And on your, if you did a referral to mental health, and avoid typing everything in all the details in ELMS, because it gets to a point where it's a lot of information, and we're just like, this is a little CPS kind of report or that you guys did, and that's followed back into your contract, or the way you want to document is your thing. We're just telling you the minimum. Can we go to the next slide? And Carrie was talking to this about follow-up notes. This is really, really critical to document, to follow up with any kind of concerns that develop during the program year. So when you meet with the family and a concern comes up, a referral comes up, the circle of help opens. It's like a circle. It opens up. So the state reviewer, when the CQI goes and checks the file, she or he or them, they would like to see the circle to be closed. I would say we, because I sometimes go and you want to see the documentation the child failed hearing, and then you want to follow up with, when did the child fail? Was it a rescreen in 2 weeks? Was it an attempt to do a referral to the doctor? Okay, it was. Now, did the child went to the appointment? Did it go? Now, is he using a hearing? Did you make a difference in the family by following it up and documenting the process of it? Did you close the circle? Once it's closed, we rest. We put the file away and say, okay, this one, it's good, thank you. If I don't see the circle closing, then I'm going to ask for another file, until we see the circle has closed. The help that opened, it closed. Can I go to the next one? Oh, wait. There we go. Okay, so this one is a mutual balance. Back to the objectives that Carrie was talking. We have this much of good detailed CPS confidential information, nice and everything, and we have zero documentation for some others. So we wanted to do this webinar, this training, to let you know what's the middle, a balance and neutral, the way of documenting things. Again, this is just a screenshot of ELMS, the kids that are attending, and there's no notes of any kind. For us, it's hard to go and read what's the process, how it's going, and hopefully you have it on the file, so in case the child gets reviewed, you have something to show. But it's, again, remember this, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. So document dates, times, specific things and moving on to the next child. And the next slide is for questions. And I think we have a lot of questions. Maybe Carrie, you have the time to read some and want to comment something?
Yeah, I had I definitely saw a few that I pulled out. One, we've talked about the opting out button in ELMS, and how this year in coronavirus we didn't ever assume that if you set goals in your first year, that if you were a returning child, that the family would say, oh, I'm opting out, I don't want to participate in that. That was an assumption we made, that if families participated in the first year, that when they were returning, they would want to continue working on their goals. So that definitely was an ELMS issue. You could not opt out for a returning child. It is in the queue to be fixed. Unfortunately for ELMS, capacity and early ECAP having to be built into ELMS, that's not a fix that's happening this school year. So we're hoping that as we move into the new school year, sometime, probably, when is that? It's coming up soon. Oh my gosh, it's almost April. When the new applications and the new school years come out, we're hoping to have that be a fix for families in the 2021-22 school year. That if you had multiple families returning over the years, that some years they could opt in and some years they could opt out. So it's in the fix. And then I saw somebody else wrote, why is the summary box disabled for mid-year check-ins? So you have your two tabs. You've got your family support tab and you've got mobility mentoring tab. And what we heard pretty early on, and I think it was Amber who asked me this. This is a great reminder for me, because that mid-year check-in had a box that you could sort of summarize what that was. And then folks who were wanting to print off their family support notes, it was in two different tabs and it was in two different places, that were like, no, for streamlining purposes, we won't have any notes be in the mobility mentoring tab. All notes will be just held in one place in the family support tab. So that's why you're not able to write into that box. But it's a great reminder to go back and the developers need to pull that box off of there. So not only is it disabled, but that it's just not even there. They just need to pull it out. So I don't know the best way to do this is to go up to the top and kind of go down, start from the bottom and go back up. I mean, there's probably 100 questions in here.
I think we can take a look at, and of course, there's a lot of comments that folks were responding to the examples that we were showing. So setting those aside, I'm wondering if there's any that speak to. Carrie, I do see a couple of in here just about confidentiality, which includes that, ELMS, in ELMS, the child's name is in ELMS. And so, why would there be an issue with using a child's name in a note, for example? Or even a question of, within DCYF, who might have access to these notes, things like that. Wondering if that might be something we could speak to.
Yeah, how are we going to answer that?
Yeah. Well, I know that one of the things that we're looking at is going to our data team around, first of all, in terms of the DCYF ECAP team, it's really just a few folks who are looking at those notes for purposes of just checking on how they're looking and how they're going, just like what we're talking about today. So it isn't anything that is widespread viewed, or nobody, it isn't an access that people are looking at folks' notes. And at the same time, it's still just good practice for us to be to make sure that it's still confidential, and that's just a generally good practice for these but it is something that I know, Carrie, we're looking at really getting more information even from our data team just about some of those specifics about that. So I don't know if you wanted to add anything, Carrie, to that.
Yeah, I would just add that the only people who have access to ELMS are the ECAP team. There's nobody else within DCYF who can have access to it, and it's in we are the stewards of the state's tax dollars being spent according to the performance standards. So ELMS is another way of us monitoring work that's being done, it's not just family support notes, right? I mean, it's teaching strategy goals, checkpoints, and all of those sort of deliverables that are being written into your contracts. We can pull reports and see who's meeting those deliverables by what date. We are really fortunate that we have this ELMS database to be able to tell such great stories and outcomes for kids and families in the state. And if and when it ever goes out to like a researcher, this is the best way I know how to describe this. Names and ages and all personal information are just like scrambled into a data system that makes that it's like a random generator. There's nothing connecting that information to personal addresses or child's names. It all gets scrambled before it gets analyzed. So there's no way to ever go back and have that information shared. And it's the stuff that goes outside of ELMS is not notes, right? It's more like the assessment. What was their pre-score? What was their post-score? And a researcher comes in and analyzes that for the state. How did we do overall, right? And they have no personal information or child names or any of that sort of thing.
And another kind of theme I'm seeing in here too, Carrie and Letty, is some comments about how and where to keep sensitive information. And there's a couple comments that folks are keeping it in a hard copy child file and document in ELMS as note in child's file in Office. So sort of making a reference that there's a note in the child file. And there's a follow-up comment here too, just that for those of you who are working at home, you might have been instructed not to keep personal notes at home. And so that's a challenge that I don't know if that's something we can address. You know, that's really at your program level for each of you as contractors of ECAP. And so really encourage you to, if that is an issue where you are unable to keep a hard copy file in your home office on a family, about how to deal with that, how to work around that. And so that would be for you to talk to with your management and your leadership in your program. Would you add anything to that, Letty or Carrie? No, okay.
No, I think with all of this, the standards are very minimal, and contractors are going to really come up with their own quality standards of what they would like to see in documentation. And that always has to be your go-to. What does your contractor say? What does your subcontract say that you will be doing?
And Carrie, there's a couple here towards the end. Maybe you can kind of put them together in regard to the purpose of the notes, as well as a question about whether the notes are discoverable. In other words, those are things that could be used in court, for example. And I don't have an answer to that, and don't know if we would be able to answer that here either without talking to our leadership about that.
I don't know the answer to that. Again, there's going to be an FAQ. There's too many questions to get to in the time we have, and we'll be sure that we find that out, but I don't know that answer.
Yeah, we don't really answer as we think we have to come as a team and answer the questions and get back to you with the right answer. So all these questions are saved in the questions box, and we'll get back to you. And are we happy? We have check-ins monthly to talk about this. So please keep putting your questions there. I can see a lot.
So I did see a theme of several people saying, oh, our family support staff couldn't get here today. So as always, we record these webinars. Slides will go up on Basecamp. It usually takes a week or two for the communications team to get it up. I would like to point out that there are two handouts in the bottom of your, the gray box. There is a handout from ELMS team that is sort of succinctly puts in all of what is the required documentation for ELMS by, you know, as far as health screenings, checkpoints, mobility mentoring, it's all in one document. So I included that document in here. And then we are trying to help. We can't give out STARS trainings for or STARS credits for webinar, but what we can do is give you a certificate that you came to this training today and that you spent an hour and a half with us. And so you can just print that out and take that with you, or make sure you download the handout so you can have a record that you participated. What? Oh, don't tell me it's not working. I worked so hard on getting that to work. Oh, shoot. Why? Somebody tell me in the chat box, why is it not? Is it because it's a PDF? It's not uploading for you? What's the... Oh, everyone's saying, oh, it worked for me. It worked for you. Oh, thank goodness.
For me. Maybe for some it worked. Wait a little bit and then try it again.
Okay.
Yeah, it worked. It worked.
Let's see. I'm trying to go back to so many questions, y'all.
Just a little comment right now while you look for another question, Carrie. If you have new family support staff that is getting into your agency or needs to be trained, this is going to be on the website. And also, you can send me an email and I will register them on the family support Basecamp that we have and the REE Basecamp too. These are good resources for family advocates, family support staff that is constantly working with families and enrollments. There's questions, notes, there's lots of things going on there. You can email me and I'll do the invite and register them.
This is the kind of group, Karen, that if we were in a room together, we could really try to come around and help you all out. So
yeah,
really appreciate the comments and questions, and thank you for being patient with the limits we have to just get to every single one right now. Go ahead, Carrie.
Well, I sort of see this theme that hopefully this answer might help clump some of these together, that sort of this idea of, well, if we have sensitive information, why do we keep it in a separate location, right? And if ELMS is secure, why not just put all that information in one place? And I think you really said it, Ray, and maybe you can say more, especially from your background in child welfare. I think it's just what we're saying is what's a best practice, is to keep the things at abbreviated, that sensitive material is not there. If you want to keep that in a separate location, that's great. I know that being a family support person all of my life, we just always had a different file for where we kept I don't know, CPS reports and all that sort of things. So again, I think it's a real contractor decision. The state does not say how to do this. We're just trying, again, to take those two end extremes, 3-word sentences and novels of family support notes, and find a middle ground. That's really what we're trying to do.
And Carrie and Letty, a couple other questions here is, as we're talking about not including information such as involved with CPS, or that there's substance abuse issues, etc. So a couple questions here of a theme is, so what's the purpose of it then? What's the data being used for if it's just general? And we spoke to that a little bit earlier, but I do see that as a question that's here as well. So, why are we documenting, right? Kind of thing. And so maybe we can speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, God, I wish we were all in the same room together, because I would just throw it back out to you all. Why do you think we need to have some minimum documentation in a system, right? How would you answer that? I know that I have
share.
Sure.
A little bit, Carrie. Remember before COVID-19, when the program was like this and everything, kind of stable, I used to look at the documentation and put together the successes and goals of families, and how you much work on connecting families to the right resources so they can reach their goals, and how the loop was closing. And I kind of like study it. I didn't say names of the parent, nothing, but in our main meeting, when we have all supervisors and all ICAP staff, I will share the story of one that I picked, the one that it has me bumps, and it makes us see what and feel what our work, what we're doing, our work satisfaction, kind of like thinking, wow, this is what ICAP does. This is what a family went through, and our family support staff is out there helping these families. And I used to tell a story once a month from the ELMS, and the only way to communicate, like from you to me, was through ELMS, because I was not gonna call and ask you, hey, what happened next? I just move on, like, oh, there was no close and ending here, so move to the next one. And this is one of the reasons. And there's so many more. What Carrie said about research, but that's it doesn't follow the name with the birth certificate and the parent's name and where they're coming from. No, it goes into a machine. It goes like this, and then it gives you charts and where families are working from and what kind of the income, lower level or higher level or IEPs. It gives you data. It doesn't give you no names and nothing that happened. Inspirational stories is what I used to share before. Now, well, I still share some goals, but I'm waiting for the program to end and then wrap up some. That's some of the things that we do. So it's a way of communication at the end, recording things. And also for you, when you document something, the teacher and the family support are working towards one goal, is child and family. So if the teacher didn't go that day and something happened, you document it, and the teacher can see when she's back and see where the child is reacting in the classroom because something happened on his life. So documentation is very critical, highly important, and needs to be confidential too.
And then I also see this theme of like, well, again, if we're asking in the application, you get, and by the way, we're not calling them risk factors anymore, we're calling them qualifying factors. So if you get points or priority points for saying my family has been experiencing abuse, we've had CPS involvement, what's the big deal about putting sensitive information into ELMS? And I'm just going to go back to performance standards. What goes into notes is a summary of discussions that should be subjective, non-biased, and you all need to make meaning of what that is to you at the contractor level. The state is not going to say, it has to absolutely look like this and it cannot contain this. We're just trying, again, we have such polar opposites of what has been happening in the notes section. We're just trying to move people a little more towards the middle. And these are absolutely decisions that contractors need to be making about what's your all philosophy on that? What do you think is the most important things to be putting in that file? You can be rest assured it doesn't get shared with anybody else. It doesn't get we still have to find out about discoverable, like if legally somebody could pull that. I don't know the answer to that, but I mean, I really just hope that you all have the freedom to be able to make those decisions yourself. The standard only says location, topic, summary of discussion, follow-up. That's it. And so everyone's really wanting to get into the weeds about the details of it. And if you are meeting the standards, if you are saying the date, the topic, and giving a summary and showing follow-up, that's meeting the standards for documentation for family support. With the mobility mentoring check-in dates. Those are also a requirement in NELMS. So the best way that I can say, I mean, it sort of sounds like I'm saying, well, I'm not going to answer that question, but I'm answering it by saying those are great conversations to be having with your contractor. Like, where do you want that stuff? How do we want to do this?
And I'll add a comment here too from Julie Flores, one of our CQI specialists with DCY ECAP. In the contract statement of work for ECAP contractors, refers to data shared with the P20W warehouse, which is researchers, that it'll be de-identified, and so that the researchers wouldn't be able to see that what the children's names are, etc. It's very much you know, all of the personal information is all changed or is all deleted, so that there won't be any delineating information in there.
Thank you, Julie, for using the correct term of de-identified instead of Letty and I. You know, they just jumble it up. They just mix it all up, right? Yeah, de-identified data is what it's called. Thanks, Julie. All right, there's got to be some more in here. There was another comment that I'm assuming that when I said, so why do you guys see value in keeping some notes in the notes section, that some people wrote, it's valuable when kids change sites, that you can kind of get a sense of what the resources they already have, or what's been working on, or some of the things, so it's easier to start picking up support for that family. This is so hard to read all of this. Okay, let me see if I can get to the bottom of this. There's another question about the opt-out. Okay, so I think I know what this says. So on returning families, there is the opt-out button is grayed out. You can't push it. And so what we've been telling folks to do is write in the goal setting box, family opted out, because it's going to force you to write a goal, because it won't let you opt out of it. So just write in the goal, family opted out. And that way, at the end of the year, I can tell the data to anybody who used the word family opted out to kick that data out of the pool. So that's what you need to say. family opted out. And yep, it's going to make you check in. It's going to give you alerts. It's going to do everything it would do if it was a note. And again, we are trying to fix it, but early ECAP is taking precedent on every build in Elms. So I don't suspect it's going to be completely finalized until the new school year or even as late as July. So we just sort of have to muddle through this year.
Carrie and Letty, I do see another question here amidst the sea of questions. They're great questions about how are paper notes in the child family support files, how do they affect audits? And my guess is like, how is that used in regard to monitoring or anything like that? So is that something that we could answer?
When you say audit, I am assuming you mean monitoring by the state, coming in and doing a monitoring visit or quality insurance. So yeah, is there a CQI specialist on this call who wants to talk about how child files that are paper might want to are going to be monitored? You can send Ray, Letty, or me a message in the chat box if you are feeling like, oh, I know the answer to that. If not, we can always get back to the CQI team and have them write an answer in response to that. But we can unmute somebody. I didn't actually see who all the CQIs are that are on here. Oh,
I think Miho and Julie are here.
I think Katie's going to try. Katie Kemp.
Okay, well, Katie Kemp, I have to unmute you, so hang on. Let me find you in the attendance. And then I will unmute you to answer this question. Thanks, Katie, for coming and helping. Almost there. There's a lot of people here I got to scroll through to find you. There you are. Okay, I am unmuting you right now, Katie. You should be unmuted.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
And did I hear that Miho and Julie are also here?
They are.
All right, well, y'all can certainly jump in and help me out then. Hi everyone, my name is Katie Kemp. I am indeed one of the CQI specialists. That stands for Continuous Quality Improvement. My pronouns are she and her. I would say if we were doing we're doing only virtual visits for monitoring this year, so we wouldn't be looking at any child files unless there's information in Elms. We can't see it this year. If we are traveling next year and we find out, for example, that a teacher or a family support person is doing only notes in a child's file, we would probably, quote, kind of give credit for the work being done, and we would maybe offer technical support ongoing or call you out of compliance when it comes to Elms entry. Does that make sense? So we would see that you were doing the work, but as far as Elms entry goes, we would maybe want you to improve that. Miho or Julie, well, gosh, it's tricky to unmute you, but I was wanting to get their input as well, whether they thought that was about right.
Yeah, so Katie, what I hear you saying is that as far as meeting the compliance piece of it, the notes are all there. You're seeing it in a child's file, but the compliance for the standard of having it in Elms is not there, and an action plan might or an action item might exist around just that component of it, that the documentation not being in Elms.
Correct. We would not throw the baby out with the bathwater. We would give you as much credit as we could for all the work that we see, but we would encourage you or require you to maybe start using ELMS, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Katie. I'm going to put you back on mute unless
Okay, bye.
you have anything else you want to add.
No, ma'am, I'm good.
Okay, thanks, Katie. Yeah, so Julie also put in the question box that there is a guide on our DCYF webpage that gives you a sort of a walkthrough of what full on-site monitoring consists of and what would be looked at, and so that you could refer to that when it comes to documentation as well. And then somebody asked, can there be no family support notes in paper files? Absolutely. We have lots of contractors that don't have paper files anymore. They only hold their information in electronic form. It gets a little bit hard when you still have paper forms for like filling out applications and that sort of thing to go completely paperless. Yeah, there's not anything that's prohibiting you from doing that. Let's see. I think Unity just asked, how do you keep those source documents, right? Like I think you mean like if you're doing like how did you calculate their income, you know, different records and things that you're using to verify their eligibility. That gets a little more tricky. Again, totally going paperless. And removing a child's file. The one contractor I can think of that does that has a very sophisticated uploading system, even that they keep their own sort of secure system of documents. As you know, ELMS does not have the ability to upload files into it, so they've kind of built their own separate thing to keep those electronic versions there. Yes, Unity. Always yet, because since I've worked here, we have seen several things that we thought were impossible to build into ELMS become absolute realities. So I do know that there is actually a team of people on our team that are investigating the ability to have ELMS actually upload documents into it. So they're looking at it. Yeah, so somebody also said, oh, it'd be helpful if ELMS didn't opt out. It is for security reasons, right, that it shuts down after a period of time, so that if you were entering something into ELMS and you left and you went on a lunch break, that somebody couldn't sit down at your computer and see that information, right? So it continually logs yourself out, and it's a bit of a pain, but that's what it does for security reasons. I think that bulk update can help you in that. Instead of, one of the reasons that we created a bulk update is because you all said, oh my gosh, this is so time consuming. I have to sit down and type 18 times that I gave out a resource for Thanksgiving baskets that are being handed out this Friday at the food bank, and I have to type that out 18 times. Well, now you don't. You have to type it once, and you can upload that all into your child and family notes. So for sure at our, oh, my dog is going off. I don't know if Ray or Letty, you guys want to answer another question until Blue calms down.
Yeah, actually, we're at 2:30. We are at 2:30, and just as we close here, because this webinar does go to 2:30 and we want to honor your time as well, we have lots of questions and comments that we're going to weed through, as Carrie mentioned, and we're going to make sure that we ask the appropriate people to come out with a document that's more of a question and answer, so that you can have that document to answer some of these questions that are harder for us to answer. And as we mentioned before, this is recorded and you'll be able to access it as well. And there is also a short post-webinar survey that's going to come out to you that we would love some feedback. That's something we're starting to do more with our webinars, is to make sure we get feedback from you about how it went. And be honest with us if it wasn't everything you needed, of course, and do know that we are going to get back to you with some of these questions as well. So please do complete that survey. And just before we go, I just, on behalf of our team, want to thank you all for all your hard work, all your great thinking, all your connecting with families, even as you yourselves are maybe having a hard time at home and parenting and teaching your children at home and all these things. So just thanks for all your work, all your hard work out there. Any other final thoughts, Carrie or Letty?
No, my dog finally stopped barking. So, but thank you all. And, you know, it'll take us a couple of weeks to really go through the FAQ and get the answers that you all need. I hope that you're leaving with just a little bit more clarity or information about documentation and ELMS. And it's nice and sunny where I'm at today, so I hope that you get to go outside wherever you are, and really look forward to you all attending our family support check-in meetings, because we will go over step by step how to use that bulk update feature.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
you for being with us, for your time.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Take care, and take care of yourselves out there, everybody. Take care of yourselves. Thank you.